The photograph arrived at the New York District Attorney's Office on March 17, 1890, wrapped in brown paper and string, accompanied by no letter of explanation. The evidence clerk who logged it, a man named Horace Whitman, recorded only its dimensions, the date, and a single word in the margin of the intake ledger: prohibited. Within 6 hours, the photograph had been transferred to a sealed room in the basement of the municipal building, accessible only by court order. Within 3 days, possession of any copy became a criminal offense under emergency municipal statute. But that part never aligned, because the photograph itself depicted nothing violent, nothing obscene, nothing that resembled the categories law enforcement recognized in 1890. No crime scene, no victim, no perpetrator caught in the frame. Just a single interior room, empty except for furniture and light. Yet by month's end, 4 people had been arrested for possessing reproductions: 2 journalists, 1 gallery owner, 1 private collector who claimed he'd never seen the original, only heard it described. The statute cited preservation of public order and prevention of mass panic. It did not explain what the photograph showed. It did not need to, because the absence spoke louder than any description the courts could provide. Before we step deeper, comment what you're doing right now while you watch this. The people in these records were doing ordinary things too. The room in the photograph no longer existed by April. The building had been demolished under emergency city contract, the debris buried in an unmarked landfill outside Newark. But the photograph remained in that sealed basement room, growing a file so thick it required its own cabinet by summer's end. One detail, however, refused containment. Everyone who saw the photograph described it differently. The earliest sworn deposition came from Margaret Hartwell, a photographic assistant at the Brady Studio on Broadway. She encountered the image on March 14th, 3 days before it reached the district attorney, when a client brought it in for duplication. Her statement, recorded on March 23rd under oath, described a parlor room with wallpaper in a floral pattern, a settee positioned beneath a window, and afternoon light casting shadows at an angle suggesting late winter. The room was empty, she testified, completely empty. No persons present. The magistrate asked her to describe any unusual features. She paused for 47 seconds. The court stenographer noted the duration in parentheses before answering. The shadows were wrong. When pressed to elaborate, Hartwell explained that the furniture cast shadows consistent with light entering from the window. But against the far wall where no furniture stood, additional shadows appeared, human-shaped. 5 of them, standing in a row, each shadow precise in its edges, as though cast by bodies positioned between the window and the wall. Bodies the photograph did not show. The magistrate asked if the shadows could have been caused by objects outside the frame. Hartwell's response was entered into the record without commentary. Shadows require substance. These had none. The Brady Studio was visited by police that afternoon. The negative plate Hartwell had been instructed to duplicate was gone. The client who brought it had provided a false name and an address that did not exist. The studio's appointment ledger for March 14th showed no scheduled sessions between 2 and 4 o'clock, the window when Hartwell claimed the interaction occurred. But her time card, stamped by the studio foreman, confirmed she had been present. The discrepancy was noted but not explained. 3 weeks later, Margaret Hartwell resigned from the Brady Studio and left New York. Her forwarding address, listed in personnel records, led to a boarding house in Philadelphia that had burned down in 1887. Yet her testimony remained, sealed but not withdrawn. Theodore Vaughan was arrested on March 28, 1890, in his residence on Gramercy Park. Police discovered 17 photographs in his private study, arranged in a sequence along the south wall. 16 depicted various New York interiors, parlors, libraries, dining rooms, all seemingly unremarkable. The 17th was the photograph. Vaughan's statement to police differed substantially from Hartwell's description. He saw no parlor, no settee, no floral wallpaper. Instead, he described a narrow room with exposed brick walls, a single chair positioned in the center, and a door standing open to reveal a hallway beyond. The light source was wrong. he insisted. It came from no visible window or lamp, but seemed to emanate from the floor itself, casting everything in an upward illumination that defied natural law. The chair was occupied, Vaughn told investigators. A woman, she faced away from the camera. When asked to describe the woman, Vaughn became specific in ways the transcript marks as unusual. Dark hair, gray dress, hands folded in her lap, posture suggesting waiting. He could not see her face, he explained, because she never turned toward the lens. But he knew, and here the transcript notes a pause of 31 seconds, that she had been there for a very long time. Police seized all 17 photographs. The first 16 were returned to Vaughn after examination revealed nothing prohibited. The 17th was transferred to the sealed evidence room. Vaughn was charged with possession of restricted material and unlawful dissemination. The charges were dropped 6 weeks later without explanation, though Vaughn was required to sign a binding silence agreement as a condition of release. He violated the agreement only once, in a letter to his sister dated July 1890, recovered after his death in 1903. In it he wrote, "They asked me what I saw. I told them, but I did not tell them what I heard." The letter did not elaborate. His sister's reply, if any existed, was never found. On April 2, 1890, the district attorney's office commissioned a forensic examination of the photograph. The task was assigned to Dr. Edwin Cross, a chemist who had previously consulted on cases involving forged documents and counterfeit currency. His laboratory occupied the 3rd floor of a building on Chambers Street. His findings were filed under seal on April 9th. The photographic paper was consistent with commercial stock produced by the Anthony Company between 1888 and 1890. The emulsion showed no evidence of tampering, double exposure, or chemical manipulation. The image had been produced through standard wet plate collodion process, properly fixed and developed. Dr. Cross identified no technical anomalies that would explain the conflicting descriptions provided by witnesses. But his report included an addendum, a single paragraph marked observational note not conclusive. During examination under magnification, Dr. Cross observed what he termed a disturbance in the silver halide grain pattern, concentrated in specific areas of the image. The disturbance did not correspond to any known form of photographic defect. When he attempted to photograph the disturbance for documentation purposes, his camera produced only blank exposures. 4 attempts. 4 failures. The photograph itself remained undamaged. He noted one additional detail. While examining the image, he experienced the persistent sensation that the room depicted in the photograph was not empty, despite the absence of any visible figures. He attributed this to subjective psychological response and declined to pursue further investigation. The addendum concluded with a recommendation that the photograph be examined by parties with expertise in perceptual phenomena beyond the scope of chemical analysis. No such examination was ever commissioned. Dr. Cross's laboratory burned down on April 30, 1890. The fire was ruled accidental. Cross relocated to Boston and refused all subsequent requests to discuss the case. His personal notes, if they survived, were never recovered. But his report remained in the file, growing brittle with age, the observational note underlined in red ink by an unknown hand. On March 19, 1890, 2 days after the photograph reached the district attorney, an art gallery on 5th Avenue opened an exhibition titled Interiors of the Invisible City. The exhibition featured 23 photographs by an artist identified only as E.S. in the catalog. The gallery owner, a man named Richard Pemberton, had received the photographs by post 3 weeks earlier, accompanied by a brief note requesting exhibition. The note was unsigned. The return address belonged to a commercial mail depot that kept no sender records. The exhibition attracted modest attention for 2 days. On the evening of March 21st, a visitor reported to gallery staff that one of the photographs, number 17 in the sequence, depicted her deceased sister. The woman became hysterical and had to be escorted from the premises. Pemberton examined the photograph in question and saw only an empty room. 3 more visitors made similar claims over the following 48 hours. Each identified a different person in the same photograph. Each became distressed. None could explain how they recognized someone in an image that appeared to Pemberton to show nothing but furniture and walls. On March 24th, police arrived at the gallery with a warrant. They removed photograph number 17 and arrested Pemberton for displaying prohibited material. The charges were based on the emergency statute enacted 5 days earlier, a statute Pemberton insisted he had never been informed of. The remaining 22 photographs were examined and cleared. The exhibition closed permanently that afternoon. Pemberton's trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented no witnesses who had seen the photograph. The defense was not permitted to introduce the image as evidence. Pemberton was convicted and sentenced to 60 days in the city jail, suspended pending his cooperation with ongoing investigation. He spent 4 hours in a closed room with investigators on April 3rd. No transcript of that interview was ever filed, but a note in Pemberton's case file, written in pencil and later partially erased, reads, "Subject claims the artist visited the gallery once, March 18th, described as erased. Said only, you're showing the wrong version." Pemberton never reopened his gallery. The building was sold in November 1890. By the following year, it had been converted into offices. The exhibition catalog survived in the New York Public Library archives until 1923, when it was removed from circulation for reasons the acquisition records do not specify. But one copy remained in private hands, annotated in the margins by an unknown reader. Next to photograph number 17, someone had written, "They all see what they've lost." The handwriting was never identified. Between March 28th and May 15th, 1890, 11 people were arrested under the emergency statute prohibiting possession of the photograph. The arrests followed no obvious geographic pattern. Subjects were detained in neighborhoods spanning from the Lower East Side to Morningside Heights. They shared no common profession, social circle, or institutional affiliation. 5 were men. 6 were women. Ages ranged from 23 to 67, but the arrest reports, filed individually and never cross-referenced by investigating officers, revealed a consistency that should have been impossible. Each subject claimed they had never sought out the photograph. It had come to them, slipped under a door, left on a doorstep, delivered by a messenger who vanished before they could ask questions. Each described receiving the image within 48 hours of experiencing what the reports variously termed personal crisis, significant loss, or emotional disturbance. A death in the family, a sudden bankruptcy, a broken engagement. The specific circumstances differed, but the timing held, and each subject, when asked to describe what the photograph depicted, offered a description that contradicted all others while remaining internally consistent. One saw a kitchen, another saw a chapel, a third saw a child's bedroom. The details were precise, specific, impossible to reconcile, yet none of the subjects showed any indication of fabrication or delusion. They described what they saw with the calm certainty of witnesses recounting observable fact. Detective William Haskell, assigned to coordinate the arrests, noted the pattern in a memorandum dated May 18th. He recommended consolidating the cases and conducting comparative analysis of the subjects' testimonies. The recommendation was acknowledged, but never acted upon. The cases remained separate. Each subject was processed individually, charged under the same statute, and released after signing agreements prohibiting discussion of the case. The agreements included a clause requiring subjects to surrender all reproductions, descriptions, or artistic renderings of the photograph. Several subjects insisted they possessed no copies, that they had seen the image once and then it had vanished. When pressed, they could not explain how the photograph had disappeared. It was simply gone. Haskell's memorandum concluded with an observation that was struck from the final filed version but remained visible beneath the black ink. Either 11 people are conspiring to tell different lies about the same image, or the image is changing. Neither explanation is acceptable. His case files went missing from police archives in 1891. The circumstances of their disappearance were never investigated. The official count remained 11 arrests, but a notation in the district attorney's private correspondence, discovered in 1947 during an unrelated archive survey, referenced a 12th case that was never formally processed. The notation appeared in a letter dated June 3, 1890, addressed to the police commissioner. It read, Read the matter of the image in question. Do not pursue the individual in question identified June 1st. Processing would require explanation we cannot provide. Subject has agreed to supervised removal from city limits. Matter closed. The letter provided no name, no address, no details of the encounter. But attached to it, secured with a rusted pin, was a single index card bearing a handwritten description. Male, age approximately 40, occupation, municipal clerk. Encountered image during routine filing of evidence documentation, May 29th. Claimed immediate recognition of depicted location as basement storage room, municipal building, 3rd sublevel. Room matches description in all particulars except one. In the photograph, the room contains a cabinet marked Evidence, sealed, 1890. Subject became severely distressed upon realizing he was viewing documentation of the location where the photograph itself is stored. When asked what else appeared in the image, subject stated, "My own desk, my chair, the lamp I'm sitting under right now. Everything, except me. I'm not in it, but my jacket is hanging on the chair." The card noted that the subject was escorted from the building and placed on indefinite medical leave. His name was redacted from all records. His personnel file disappeared from city archives. No further documentation exists. But the index card remained, filed in the wrong folder, misfiled so thoroughly it evaded discovery for 57 years. When researchers attempted to locate the 3rd sublevel of the municipal building in 1947, they found that no such level existed in any architectural plans. The building's lowest accessible point was designated Sublevel 2. Contractors consulted during a 1923 renovation reported discovering a sealed stairwell descending beyond that point. But the entrance had been bricked over and no investigation was authorized. The stairwell was never reopened. The location of its entrance is no longer marked on any building schematic. Sarah Brennan worked for the New York Evening Post from 1887 to 1891, primarily covering municipal affairs and criminal proceedings. She was arrested on April 6, 1890, after attempting to publish an article about the photograph under the headline, "The Image the Law Cannot Explain." The article never ran. The typeset galleys were confiscated during a raid on the newspaper's offices. Brennan was held for 36 hours before being released without charge. Her personal notebooks, donated to the Columbia University Library in 1932 after her death, contained drafts and research notes spanning her entire career. Most entries were dated and clearly attributed. But one section, 12 pages near the back of a leather journal from 1890, bore no dates and had been partially redacted with black ink, applied so heavily that the paper had torn in places. Beneath the redactions, visible only under specific lighting conditions, fragments of text survived. Spoke to the widow of redacted, who claimed her husband saw the photograph 2 weeks before his death. She insists he became obsessed with proving the room existed. He spent days searching municipal records, building permits, architectural plans, found nothing. On the night before his death, he told her, "It's not that the room doesn't exist, it's that it exists in the wrong place." The photographer, if such a person exists, has never been identified. The studio mark visible in one corner of the print, a small stamped symbol resembling a compass rose, does not match any registered photographer in New York or surrounding jurisdictions. Cross-reference with the Photographers Association Directory, 1885 to 1890. No match. 3 of the arrested subjects mentioned hearing something when they viewed the photograph. Not sound captured in the image, impossible, obviously, but sound they experienced while looking at it, described as breathing, footsteps on wood, a door closing very softly. All 3 subjects adamant that the sound came from inside the photograph, not from their surroundings. Investigator notes this as evidence of shared delusion. But why would 3 unconnected people imagine the same category of sound? The final legible fragment ended mid-sentence. If the photograph is evidence, then what it documents is not a place, but a... The rest had been torn away. The missing section was never found. Brennan never published another article about the case. She left the Evening Post in 1891 and moved to Chicago, where she worked in library administration until her death. But she kept the notebook. and in the margin of one redacted page, in handwriting that analysis confirmed as hers, someone had added a single line years later. "I saw it. Once. They were right to bury it." On May 22, 1890, the district attorney's office received an unsolicited letter from Jonathan Pierce, a licensed architect with offices on Barclay Street. Pierce claimed to recognize the room depicted in the photograph, not from personal experience, but from architectural drawings he had been commissioned to produce in 1884. The commission, Pierce stated, came from a private client who requested plans for a residential interior renovation. The client specified unusual requirements: a room with no exterior windows, lit entirely by artificial means, with walls constructed to prevent acoustic transmission in either direction. Pierce produced the drawings as requested and was paid in full. The client took possession of the plans, and Pierce never learned whether the room was actually built. But when he saw a reproduction of the photograph, how he obtained it, he did not say. He recognized the spatial proportions and wall configurations as matching his 1884 design exactly. Pierce's letter included a detailed technical analysis comparing the photograph to his archived drawings. The ceiling height, wall angles, and floor dimensions aligned within margins of error, typical of construction variants. More significantly, he identified a structural detail visible in the photograph that appeared in his plans, but would be impossible to observe in a finished room: a support beam configuration hidden behind plaster and wallpaper. "The photograph shows what should not be visible," Pierce wrote. "Either the walls were never finished, or the image was captured by means that penetrate physical barriers." The district attorney's office responded by requesting Pierce's presence for a formal deposition. He appeared on May 29th and provided sworn testimony corroborating his letter. He also surrendered his original 1884 drawings, which were placed in the sealed evidence file. During the deposition, Pierce was asked to identify his client. He provided a name, Mr. E. Stillwell, address unknown. Record searches found no individual by that name in New York property or business registries. Pierce maintained that all communication with the client had been conducted through written correspondence delivered by messenger. He never met Stillwell in person and retained no copies of their letters. When asked if he had any theory about the photograph's purpose, Pierce responded, "I designed a room to contain something. The photograph suggests I succeeded." He declined to elaborate. The deposition concluded without additional questioning. Pierce left New York 3 weeks later and relocated to San Francisco, where he continued architectural practice until his death in 1909. His firm's archive was destroyed in the 1906 earthquake and fire. No other copies of the 1884 drawings survived. In August 1890, a routine audit of the district attorney's evidence storage system revealed an irregularity in the documentation chain. Evidence items were logged into a master ledger upon intake, assigned a unique reference number, and then transferred to appropriate storage locations. The ledger served as the authoritative record of all materials in custody. The photograph had been assigned reference number 1990-317AX upon arrival on March 17th. But the master ledger contained no entry under that number. The sequence jumped from 1890-37AW to 1890-0317AY, skipping the photograph entirely. The physical evidence file existed. The photograph remained in sealed storage. Dozens of associated documents, arrest reports, depositions, correspondence, referenced the 1890-0317AX number. But the master ledger, the foundational record that should have documented its existence, contained no mention of it. The auditor who discovered the discrepancy, a clerk named Morton Wells, noted it in his report dated August 14th. He theorized that the intake clerk had committed a transcription error, perhaps assigning the number but failing to record it in the ledger. Such errors occurred occasionally in high-volume periods. But Wells's report included a detail that complicated the simple explanation. He had consulted the original evidence intake forms signed by Horace Whitman on March 17th. The forms clearly showed reference number 1990-0317AX being assigned and initialed. Wells then examined the ledger entries for the days surrounding March 17th, looking for any sign of the missing entry having been erased or removed. He found no evidence of alteration. The page was clean. The ink showed no breaks in continuity. But when he held the page up to strong light, he observed a faint impression, as though something had once been written in the space where the entry should have appeared, then somehow lifted away without leaving trace of erasure. Wells recommended that Whitman be questioned about the discrepancy. Records indicate the interview was scheduled for August 23rd. It never occurred. Horace Whitman failed to report for work that morning. His residence was found locked and empty. Personal effects remained, suggesting no planned departure. Whitman was never located. No missing person report was filed. His name appeared in no subsequent city records. He simply ceased to exist in all documentation after August 22, 1890. The ledger discrepancy was noted but never resolved. Evidence reference 1890-0317-AX continued to be cited in case files despite having no official existence in the master record. The audit report concluded with a stamped notation, "Irregularity observed, no corrective action possible." In September 1890, a prosecutor's clerk named Alice Greer was tasked with organizing the accumulated case files related to the photograph. The files had grown chaotic. Documents from multiple arrests, depositions, evidence reports, and correspondence mixed together without clear chronology. Greer's assignment was to create a master timeline, establishing the sequence of events. She worked methodically, extracting dates from each document and arranging them in order. The timeline began clearly. Photograph arrives March 17th, first arrest March 28th, emergency statute enacted March 20th. But as Greer continued, contradictions emerged that could not be reconciled through simple clerical error. Margaret Hartwell's deposition was dated March 23rd. It described her encounter with the photograph on March 14th, 3 days before the photograph officially arrived at the district attorney's office. Greer initially assumed Hartwell had confused dates under stress of interrogation. But Hartwell's sworn statement included specific corroborating details. Weather conditions on March 14th, she mentioned rain. A news headline she read that morning, confirmed in archived newspapers, and the studio foreman's signature on her time card, which bore the correct date stamp. Theodore Vaughn's arrest report indicated he possessed the photograph for approximately 6 weeks before police seizure on March 28th. That placed his acquisition around mid-February, a full month before the image officially entered the evidentiary record. The gallery exhibition opened March 19th, featuring a photograph matching all descriptions of the prohibited image. But Pemberton's testimony stated he received the photographs 3 weeks earlier, meaning late February, again predating the March 17th arrival. Greer documented 12 such discrepancies. Each involved subjects possessing or encountering the photograph before it supposedly existed in any official capacity. The timeline suggested not a single photograph entering circulation, but multiple copies or versions appearing simultaneously through different channels. She presented her findings to the supervising prosecutor in a memorandum dated September 28th. The memorandum posed a direct question. How can evidence be seized from 11 people if that evidence did not yet exist when they acquired it? The prosecutor's response, written in the margin and initialed, consisted of 2 words: "It can't." No further investigation of the timeline discrepancies was authorized. Greer was reassigned to different cases. Her organized files were returned to storage, unsorted. When researchers accessed the case materials in later years, they found the documents mixed together again, as though Greer's work had never occurred. But her memorandum survived, buried in a stack of routine correspondence. The prosecutor's 2-word response remained visible, though someone had later attempted to erase the initials. On October 2, 1890, Margaret Hartwell returned to New York voluntarily and requested a meeting with the district attorney's office. She had been living in Philadelphia since her March departure, working under an assumed name. She stated she had information that would clarify her earlier testimony. The meeting was conducted in a private office with 2 prosecutors present. No stenographer was initially present, unusual for a witness interview, but notes were taken by hand. Those notes survived in fragmentary form, later filed among miscellaneous correspondence. Hartwell began by stating that her March 23 deposition had been truthful but incomplete. She had described what she saw in the photograph, the empty parlor, the impossible shadows, but had not revealed what happened after she viewed it. "I carried it with me," the notes record her saying. "Not physically. I couldn't touch it. But it followed me. Every room I entered for 3 days afterward, I saw that room overlaid on top of it. The parlor, the shadows. I would be sitting in my boarding house and the walls would shimmer, and for just a moment I'd be looking at both rooms simultaneously. It was driving me to panic." She claimed the phenomenon ceased only after she left New York. In Philadelphia, the overlapping images stopped, but she remained conscious that something had changed in her perception. She could not explain what exactly, except that rooms no longer felt entirely solid to her. The notes record that one prosecutor asked whether she had told anyone else about these experiences. Hartwell said no. She feared being declared mentally unfit. But after 6 months, she felt compelled to report it because she believed others might be experiencing the same thing. The prosecutors asked if she had any evidence to support her claims. She had none. They asked if she could describe the phenomenon in terms that might be medically assessed. She said it was like seeing through walls, but only into one specific other room that shouldn't exist. The meeting concluded with prosecutors thanking her for coming forward. No formal addendum to her original deposition was filed. Hartwell was escorted from the building and advised that her testimony had been noted. The handwritten notes from the meeting were placed in her original case file, but no reference to the October meeting appeared in any index or summary document. Hartwell left New York the same day. City directories show her living in Philadelphia until 1903, working as a seamstress. She never married, maintained no known close associations, and died in 1904 from pneumonia. Her death certificate listed no next of kin. Her few possessions were liquidated by the boarding house owner to cover unpaid rent. Among the items sold was a small leather journal, purchased by a second-hand book dealer for 15 cents. The journal's current location is unknown. Dr. Leonard Ashford maintained a private psychiatric practice on Madison Avenue from 1887 to 1895. His client records, donated to the New York Academy of Medicine in 1920, included a file labeled "Confidential Cases, No Names," containing notes on patients whose identities he felt ethically obligated to protect, even posthumously. One set of notes, dated June through August 1890, described a patient Ashford referred to only as Subject M. The subject sought treatment for what Ashford initially diagnosed as acute perceptual disturbance following traumatic stimulus. Subject M reported viewing a photograph that triggered an ongoing alteration in visual perception. Rooms appeared to contain echoes, faint overlapping images of other spaces visible at certain angles or in particular lighting conditions. The echoes lasted only seconds but recurred multiple times daily. Subject M described the experience as seeing all the places a room has been, or all the rooms a space could contain simultaneously. Ashford's notes indicate he initially suspected psychotic episode or neurological damage, but physical examination revealed no abnormalities. Subject M demonstrated clear cognition, rational thought, and no other symptoms of mental illness. The perceptual disturbances appeared isolated to visual processing of architectural spaces. Over several sessions, Ashford documented patterns in the echoes. They occurred most frequently in older buildings, in rooms with specific dimensional proportions, and always in enclosed spaces, never outdoors. Subject M learned to anticipate the episodes and began avoiding certain locations. But the notes from the August 12th session took a different tone. Subject M arrived in severe distress, claiming the echoes had intensified. Now, instead of faint overlapping images, Subject M reported seeing entire rooms replace physical reality for extended periods, up to a minute at a time. During these episodes, Subject M remained physically present in the actual location but experienced complete sensory immersion in the echo room. Most disturbing, Ashford wrote, is that Subject M claims these echo rooms are not empty. There are figures present, shadows, shapes, partially formed human silhouettes that appear aware of Subject M's presence. The August 12th session was the last. Subject M did not return for the scheduled August 19th appointment. Ashford attempted to follow up through the contact address provided, but received no response. He noted in the file that he considered reporting the case to medical colleagues for consultation, but worried about breaching patient confidentiality. The notes concluded with a handwritten addendum dated September 1890. Have subsequently learned through indirect sources that several individuals have sought treatment for similar symptoms following exposure to a specific photographic image, currently under legal restriction. The pattern suggests environmental trigger rather than individual pathology. If image remains in circulation, case count may increase. Have considered reporting to public health authorities, but lack sufficient evidence to justify intervention. No report was ever filed. Ashford's practice closed in 1895 when he relocated to England for unspecified personal reasons. He died there in 1901. The file remained sealed in the Academy's archives until 1920, then buried in uncatalogued storage until 1967. By then, no one remained who could identify Subject M or confirm whether others had sought similar treatment. In November 1890, the district attorney received a letter postmarked from Providence, Rhode Island. The envelope bore no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing a message written in careful, formal script. To whom it may concern, I am writing to report that I possess a photograph matching the description of the image, currently restricted under New York municipal statute. I acquired this photograph through legal means prior to the enactment of said statute and request clarification regarding my legal obligations. I am willing to surrender the photograph if required, but seek assurance that doing so will not result in criminal prosecution. I would appreciate a response at your earliest convenience. The letter was not signed. No name appeared anywhere in the text. The postmark was clear, but the date stamp had been partially smudged, possibly deliberately, making it difficult to determine the exact mailing date beyond early November. A notation on the envelope indicated the letter was received November 8th and assigned to Assistant District Attorney William Morgan for response. Morgan drafted a reply on November 10th, explaining that the statute applied regardless of acquisition date and instructing the sender to surrender the photograph to local Rhode Island authorities who would coordinate with New York. But the reply could not be sent. The original letter provided no return address, and the sender had included no identifying information that could be used to locate them. Morgan's draft response was placed in the file marked "Unable to deliver, no recipient address." The incident should have ended there. But 3 weeks later, on December 1st, a second letter arrived. Same handwriting, same Rhode Island postmark. The message was brief. Your silence is noted. I interpret it as permission to retain the photograph in my possession. If this interpretation is incorrect, please respond to the return address I have provided below. Below this text was written an address, 47 Benefit Street, Providence. Morgan immediately dispatched a telegram to Providence Police requesting they visit the address and secure the photograph. Providence Police responded within 2 days. No such address existed. Benefit Street ran only through the low 30s. Number 47 would have been located in the Providence River. Morgan filed both letters together with a note. Correspondent may be providing false information. No means of verification or contact available. Matter unresolved. No third letter arrived. But in March 1891, Morgan received a small package, again postmarked Providence. Inside was a photograph, not the prohibited image, but a picture of an empty storefront. The windows were dark. A sign above the door read, E. Stillwell, photographer. No street name was visible. No city landmarks appeared in the frame. Attached to the photograph was a note in the same handwriting. You asked where the photograph came from. This is where it went. Morgan showed the image to several Providence colleagues who had business in that city. None recognized the storefront. Providence city directories from 1885 to 1891 listed no photographer named E. Stillwell. The building pictured could have been anywhere. The package remained in Morgan's office until his retirement in 1902. Its current location is unknown, but Morgan's case notes survived, including a final entry dated March 1891. If the correspondent possessed the photograph, they would have sent it, They sent something else instead. This suggests they either no longer have it or never did. Both possibilities are troubling. In February 1891, building inspectors conducting a routine safety review of the municipal building discovered a room that did not appear on any architectural plans. The room was located on the second floor, accessible through a door that staff claimed had always been locked. When inspectors insisted on entry, the door was opened with a master key. Inside was a rectangular space, approximately 12 by 15 feet, containing a single wooden desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. The walls were painted white. No windows. A gas lamp fixture on the ceiling, though the gas line had been disconnected. The room was thick with dust, suggesting years of disuse. The filing cabinet was empty except for a single folder. Inside the folder was a list of names, 17 of them, handwritten in black ink. Several names matched individuals arrested under the photograph statute in 1890. Others did not appear in any case files or municipal records. The inspectors noted the discovery in their report and recommended the room be properly documented in building records. But when they returned with surveyors 2 days later to measure and map the space, they could not locate it. The second-floor corridor where the door had been showed no evidence of an entrance. The wall was continuous, solid, and clearly original construction based on plaster condition and paint age. The inspectors questioned building staff. 3 custodians confirmed the locked door had existed in that location for years. But when pressed, none could remember ever seeing it opened or knowing what lay beyond it. 2 staff members insisted the door had been at the corridor's west end. One placed it at the east end. The positions they described were 40 feet apart. The lead inspector, a man named Charles Brennan, filed a supplementary report on February 24, 1891. In it, he stated either the room was removed with impossible speed and the wall reconstructed without trace, or the room was never there, and 7 witnesses, including myself, experienced identical delusion. I have no explanation that satisfies both the physical evidence and the testimony. Building administrators responded by ordering a complete architectural survey of the municipal building. The survey, conducted over 3 weeks in March, documented every room, corridor, and storage space. The results confirmed the second floor contained no unexplained spaces or structural anomalies. Total square footage matched original 1861 construction plans precisely. The folder with 17 names was placed in general building administrative files. It was misfiled, rediscovered in 1903, filed again, lost again, and finally located in 1931 during archive consolidation. By then, the context had been forgotten. The list of names was filed under unknown personnel records and remained there until the building was demolished in 1951. But Charles Brennan kept personal notes on the incident. These were donated to the city archives by his daughter in 1938. Among them was a sketch he had made of the room from memory. The proportions and layout matched Jonathan Pierce's 1884 architectural drawings exactly, though Brennan had no knowledge of Pierce's testimony, and the sealed case files were not accessible to building inspectors. Brennan added a note beneath his sketch. "If I imagined this room, I imagined it according to blueprints I never saw." On July 14, 1891, a print shop on Canal Street was visited by police following an anonymous tip that the establishment was producing unauthorized reproductions of restricted material. The tip proved accurate. Police discovered a printing plate locked in the shop owner's private safe, along with 23 printed copies of the photograph. The shop owner, Emil Kovac, a Croatian immigrant who operated a legitimate commercial printing business, claimed he had been commissioned to produce the copies 2 weeks earlier. The client had provided the original photograph, paid in advance, and instructed Kovac to create the plate and print 50 copies. Kovac had completed 23 when the police arrived. When questioned about the client, Kovac provided a description that matched no individual in any case file. Elderly woman, well-dressed, carried herself with authority, spoke with what Kovac believed was a European accent, though he could not identify the specific region. She gave the name Mrs. Vasari, but provided no address or contact information. She paid in silver coins, a detail Kovac found unusual but not suspicious at the time. More significantly, Kovach's description of the photograph he was commissioned to reproduce did not match the image police seized from his shop. Kovach insisted the original showed a library with bookshelves and a reading table. The seized prints showed a hallway with closed doors on both sides, a description that appeared in none of the 1890 witness testimonies. Police concluded Kovach was lying to avoid prosecution, but examination of the printing plate revealed an anomaly. The plate contained two overlapping images, the hallway visible in the prints, and beneath it, barely detectable, a second image that could have been the library Kovach described. Photographic experts consulted by prosecutors could not explain how two distinct images could exist on a single plate without obvious signs of composite work or manipulation. The prints and plate were confiscated. Kovach was charged with unlawful reproduction of prohibited material, but released pending trial. The trial never occurred. On August 3rd, prosecutors filed a motion to dismiss, citing insufficient evidence to proceed. The motion offered no explanation for this sudden reversal. Kovach returned to find his shop vandalized. The printing equipment had been destroyed, not merely damaged, but systematically dismantled in a manner suggesting expert knowledge of printing machinery. Nothing was stolen. The destruction appeared to target only the tools capable of reproducing photographic images. Kovach closed his business and left New York within the month. Immigration records show him departing for Europe on August 28, 1891. He never returned. No correspondence from him appears in any American archives after that date. The printing plate was transferred to the sealed evidence room and added to the growing file. But the 23 prints were not. The seizure inventory listed them, but they do not appear in the evidence log. No transfer authorization was filed. No destruction record was created. The prints simply disappeared from custody, their fate unaccounted for in any official documentation. By the end of 1891, the sealed evidence file contained 47 separate documents describing what the photograph depicted. The descriptions had been collected from arrests, interrogations, voluntary depositions, and confiscated written accounts. An anonymous clerk, identity never determined, compiled them into a single catalog dated December 1891. The catalog grouped descriptions by similarity, attempting to identify patterns. The results were peculiar. 17 descriptions mentioned empty rooms of various configurations. 12 mentioned rooms with furniture but no people. 9 mentioned human figures, though the descriptions of these figures varied. Shadows, silhouettes, fully formed people, partially transparent forms. 3 mentioned outdoor settings, impossible given that all other accounts agreed the photograph showed an interior space. 4 described impossible spatial arrangements. Rooms larger than the buildings containing them, corridors that curved without changing direction, spaces with too many corners. 2 descriptions defied classification entirely. 1 described a room in the process of becoming another room. Another stated simply, "It shows every room I've ever been afraid to enter." But the catalog's compiler noted something more disturbing than the variations themselves. When cross-referenced with the dates the descriptions were recorded, a pattern emerged. Early descriptions from March-April 1890 tended toward concrete specificity, rooms with definite dimensions, identifiable furnishings, measurable features. Later descriptions grew progressively more abstract, metaphorical, impossible to visualize. The compiler added a note: either witnesses are becoming less reliable over time, or the photograph itself is becoming less stable. The evidence supports neither explanation fully. The catalog concluded with a list of consistent elements, details that appeared across multiple otherwise incompatible descriptions. These were few. 1. The photograph always depicted an enclosed space. 2. The lighting was always wrong in some way, too bright, too dark, sourceless, or coming from impossible directions. 3. Something was always missing that should have been present. 4. All viewers reported a sense of recognition even when they could not identify the specific location. The catalog was filed with the evidence but never officially acknowledged. The compiler added a final note in pencil, later partially erased: "We are cataloging testimonies about different photographs, or testimonies about a photograph that changes, or testimonies about something that is not a photograph at all." The catalog resurfaced during a 1947 archive survey. By then, most of the original witnesses were deceased. The few survivors who could be located declined to discuss the case. One, contacted by telephone, stated only, "I don't remember what it showed. I remember what it did." The call log noted the witness disconnected before the interviewer could ask follow-up questions. In March 1892, a woman named Iris Talbot contacted the district attorney's office with an unusual offer. Talbot was a professional copyist who specialized in reproducing paintings and photographs for clients who required duplicates of original artworks. She claimed she possessed the technical skill to create an exact copy of the prohibited photograph, a copy that could be used for investigative purposes while keeping the original sealed. The proposal was considered. Several prosecutors recognized potential value in having a reproduction that could be examined, analyzed, and if necessary destroyed without risk to the original evidence. Talbot was interviewed on March 18th. She provided credentials demonstrating her expertise and offered to work under direct supervision to ensure no unauthorized copies entered circulation. After 2 weeks of deliberation, permission was granted. Talbot was allowed access to the sealed evidence room on April 3, 1892, accompanied by 2 assistant prosecutors who would monitor the copying process. She was given 3 hours to complete the work. According to the monitoring report filed April 4th, Talbot spent the first hour examining the photograph under various lighting conditions, making notes and measurements. She then prepared her materials: photosensitive paper, chemical solutions, and specialized copying apparatus. The prosecutors observed her process, but noted they could not verify technical accuracy, as neither had expertise in photographic reproduction. Talbot completed the copy after 2 hours and 40 minutes. She presented it to the prosecutors for inspection. Both men examined it alongside the original. The monitoring report states, "Copy appears identical in all observable respects, dimensions match, tonal values consistent, no obvious artifacts of reproduction process visible to our assessment." But then something unexpected occurred. The report continues, Miss Talbot requested permission to examine her copy once more before finalizing approval. Upon second viewing, she became agitated, stated the copy was wrong, though she could not articulate how. She requested additional time to correct errors she claimed to observe. We compared copy to original again, could detect no discrepancies. Miss Talbot became insistent, stated, "I copied what I saw, but what I saw isn't what you're looking at." Became increasingly distressed. We terminated the session. Talbot left the building without collecting her fee. The copy she produced was examined by 3 additional experts over the following week. All concluded it was an accurate reproduction. But when attorneys attempted to contact Talbot to complete the commission, they discovered she had closed her studio and left no forwarding address. The copy was filed with the original, but a notation added to the case file in May 1892 recorded a concerning detail. Custodial staff responsible for the sealed evidence room reported that when they conducted routine inspection, they found 2 photographs in the storage box instead of 1. Neither was marked as the original or the copy. They were identical in every measurable way. No method existed to determine which had been present since 1890 and which Talbot had created. The decision was made to retain both under the same evidence number, but the question of which was which remained unresolved. Iris Talbot surfaced once more in public records, a death certificate filed in Boston, 1894. Cause of death, suicide. She left a brief note preserved in probate records. I cannot stop seeing both versions. In 1893, Professor Martin Haywood of Columbia College approached the district attorney's office with a request to study the photograph as part of research into optical perception and psychological phenomena. Haywood, who held a position in the Department of Philosophy and had published papers on perceptual illusions, argued that the photograph represented a unique opportunity to investigate how observers construct meaning from ambiguous visual stimuli. His request was initially denied, but Haywood persisted, submitting a formal research proposal in June 1893 that outlined safeguards against unauthorized reproduction and proposed a controlled study design. After review, limited access was granted. Haywood was permitted to view the photograph once for 30 minutes under supervision, with the understanding he would produce a written analysis for the district attorney's records. The viewing occurred on July 12, 1893. Haywood spent the allotted time examining the photograph, making detailed notes. He conducted the session in complete silence, responding to supervisors' questions only with nods. At the session's conclusion, he thanked the prosecutors and left. His written analysis, submitted August 1, 1893, ran to 14 pages. Most consisted of technical discussion of visual perception theory, Gestalt psychology, and the mechanisms by which brains interpret two-dimensional images as three-dimensional spaces. But the final 3 pages departed from academic objectivity. Haywood wrote, "The photograph is not an illusion. It is not a trick of perception, not a result of poor image quality or ambiguous composition. What makes the photograph anomalous is not what it depicts, but how it depicts it. The image appears to exist in a perceptual state that violates the basic mechanism of photographic recording, the freezing of a single moment." He continued, "Every photograph captures one temporal instance. The viewer sees what the camera saw at one specific second. But this photograph appears to capture multiple temporal states simultaneously. When I examined it, I observed, I have no better term, temporal overlay. The room existed in several states at once: empty, occupied, partially constructed, partially demolished, not as multiple exposures which would show blur and transparency, but as complete, distinct states sharing the same space." The analysis concluded with a statement that Haywood's supervisors noted was highly unusual for an academic document. "I do not believe this photograph should exist. I cannot explain its existence through any framework of photographic science or perceptual psychology I have encountered. My recommendation is that it be destroyed, not sealed. Preservation perpetuates whatever error or violation of natural law it represents." The recommendation was not followed, but Haywood's analysis was filed under seal and never published. Haywood himself withdrew from academic life the following year. Taking a position as a librarian in rural Connecticut, he published no further research. In 1911, a former colleague wrote to him requesting permission to reference his earlier work on perceptual illusions. Haywood's reply, preserved in the colleague's papers, declined. "My work on perception was based on flawed assumptions. I no longer believe we see what we think we see. I especially do not believe photographs show what we think they show." The last person arrested under the emergency photograph statute was detained on November 2, 1894, 4.5 years after the law's enactment. The case differed from all previous arrests in one significant way. The subject possessed no physical copy of the photograph. Her name was Catherine Moore. She worked as a telegraph operator for Western Union and lived alone in a boarding house on East 14th Street. Police arrested her after receiving a complaint from her supervisor that Moore had been sending unauthorized messages describing a restricted image to multiple recipients. The complaint was investigated immediately due to the photograph's ongoing classification. Detectives questioned Moore on October 30th. She admitted to sending the telegrams, but insisted she had never seen any photograph. When asked what she was describing in her messages, Moore provided an explanation that the arresting officers noted as coherent but implausible. She claimed that 3 weeks earlier, she had begun experiencing vivid dreams of a room she did not recognize. The dreams occurred nightly and were unusually consistent in detail. Unusual because Moore stated her normal dreams were fragmented and quickly forgotten. But these dreams presented the same room with perfect clarity each time. Narrow, brick walls, a single high window, a door that wouldn't open, and a chair positioned in the center. After 2 weeks of identical dreams, Moore became convinced the room was real and that something in it required attention. She began describing the room in telegrams to contacts in various cities, asking if anyone recognized the location. She sent 27 such messages over 6 days. 3 recipients reported the messages to authorities. The descriptions Moore provided matched details from several 1890 witness testimonies about the photograph, details that had never been made public. When investigators questioned Moore about how she knew these details if she had never seen the photograph, she had no answer. She insisted the information came from her dreams, But when pressed to explain how dreams could replicate specific unpublished evidence, Moore became distressed. "I don't know where the dreams came from," the arrest report quotes her saying. "But they aren't just dreams. Someone is in that room, someone has been there for a very long time, and they're trying to tell anyone who will listen that they need help." Moore was held for 48 hours and then released without charge. The emergency statute technically applied only to physical possession of the photograph or its reproductions. Moore possessed neither, but she was required to sign an agreement prohibiting any further communication about the room, dreams, or related subjects. She complied. Western Union terminated her employment nonetheless. Moore left New York in December 1894 and moved to her sister's home in Baltimore. She worked various clerical positions and lived quietly until her death in 1922. But in 1920, 2 years before her death, Moore wrote a letter to the New York District Attorney's office. The letter was brief. "I am writing to inform you that I still dream of the room, every night for 26 years. The person in the chair is still there. They are still waiting. I thought you should know." The letter was filed without response. No one followed up. In 1899, the municipal building underwent partial renovation to accommodate expanding city offices. During structural assessment, engineers discovered the sealed evidence room in the basement had developed water damage from a leaking pipe. The damage threatened the integrity of materials stored there, including the photograph. Authorization was granted to temporarily relocate sensitive evidence to secure alternative storage. On March 3, 1899, custodial staff opened the sealed room for the first time since 1891. The inventory conducted that day revealed significant discrepancies. The case file for reference number 1890-0317-AX had grown to 3 storage boxes instead of the 2 boxes recorded in 1891 documentation. More concerning, the photograph itself existed in 7 copies instead of the 2 documented after Iris Talbot's 1892 reproduction session. Custodians conducting the inventory noted, "All 7 photographs appear identical. No marking or documentation indicates which is original. No records explain presence of 5 additional copies." The discovery prompted an immediate investigation. The sealed room's access log showed no unauthorized entries. Only 3 custodians possessed keys, and all 3 confirmed they had never opened the room between 1891 and 1899. The lock showed no signs of tampering. The room's single entrance had been under continuous surveillance by building security. A guard station stood directly across the corridor. Yet somehow, 5 additional copies had appeared in a locked room during an 8-year period when the room was never accessed. The investigation report, filed March 1899, concluded, "Either copies were present before 1891 and missed during previous inventories, or copies were placed in the room through means we cannot determine. Neither explanation accounts for all facts." A decision was made to destroy the additional copies, but when custodians attempted to do so, they encountered an obstacle. The copies were to be burned in the building's furnace under supervision. However, when the first copy was placed in the fire, it did not burn. The paper charred at the edges, but the image remained visible. Increased temperature had no effect. After 30 minutes at maximum furnace heat, the photograph was withdrawn. It was damaged but not destroyed. The image was still discernible. 4 more attempts were made with different copies. Results varied slightly. Some showed more damage than others, but none were successfully destroyed. The experiments were discontinued after the furnace operator reported experiencing severe headaches and visual disturbances during the process. All 7 copies were returned to storage in a new location, a reinforced room with improved environmental controls. The decision to destroy them was postponed indefinitely. A note in the March 1899 file stated, "Until method of secure destruction can be determined, materials will remain in custody." The 7 photographs stayed in storage, but the inventory problem worsened. By 1902, records indicated 9 copies existed. By 1905, 12. No explanation was ever determined. The final inventory before the municipal building's 1951 demolition recorded 17 copies. All were transferred to a secure warehouse. The warehouse burned in 1953. When firefighters searched the ruins, they found no photographic material. The photographs, if they had been there, left no trace. In 1906, Theodore Vaughan, the collector arrested in 1890, returned to New York after 16 years' absence. He was 63 years old and in deteriorating health. Within 2 weeks of his arrival, he sent a letter to the district attorney's office requesting a meeting to discuss unfinished testimony regarding case 189-0317AX. The meeting was granted, though the case had been considered closed since 1895. Vaughan appeared on July 9, 1906, accompanied by his physician, who stated Vaughan was of sound mind despite declining physical condition. Vaughan opened by acknowledging he had violated his 1890 silence agreement by requesting the meeting. He stated he was willing to accept any legal consequences but felt compelled to provide information he had withheld during his original arrest. "I told investigators in 1890 that I saw a woman in a chair," the meeting notes recorded him saying. "That was true. But I did not tell them what the woman was doing. She was writing. She had paper in her lap and she was writing constantly, without stopping, filling page after page. I could not see what she wrote. But I watched for 30 minutes and she never paused, never looked up, never stopped writing." Vaughan explained he had withheld this detail because it seemed too specific, too strange, and he feared it would make his testimony appear fabricated. But the detail had haunted him for 16 years. "I need to know," he told prosecutors, "if anyone else saw her writing. Because if they did, then perhaps someone knows what she was writing. And if someone knows what she was writing, then perhaps they understand why she's there." Prosecutors informed Vaughan that all witness testimonies remained sealed and they could not disclose whether others had reported similar details. But they recorded his statement and added it to the case file. Before leaving, Vaughan made one additional comment that prosecutors noted as particularly affecting. "I don't know if the woman was trapped in the photograph, or if the photograph was showing us a room where someone was trapped. But whichever it is, she's been writing for at least 16 years. That's a very long message. Someone should be reading it." Vaughan died 3 months later, in October 1906. His estate included a detailed journal documenting his 16-year attempt to investigate the photograph's origin. The journal contained sketches, research notes, correspondence with experts in photography and optics, and a list of theories he had developed and rejected. The journal's final entry, dated September 1906, read, "I have concluded that the photograph is not evidence of a crime. It is not a fake or illusion. It is a window, and someone on the other side has been trying to communicate through it since before it was taken." The journal was donated to the New York Historical Society in 1908 by Vaughan's executor. It was catalogued but never studied in depth. In 1973, a researcher requested access and discovered the journal was missing from the collection. Archive staff could find no record of it being removed or relocated. The journal's current location remains unknown. By 1915, most individuals directly involved with the photograph case had died or reached advanced age. Of the 11 officially arrested subjects, 7 were deceased. Of the 4 surviving, 3 declined all requests for interviews regarding the case. The 4th, a man who had been 23 at the time of his arrest and was now 48, agreed to speak with a city archivist conducting historical documentation. The interview occurred in June 1915. The subject, whose name was redacted from the transcript per his request, spoke carefully, weighing each statement. He began by confirming he had seen the photograph in 1890 and that his testimony from that time remained accurate. But when asked if he could still remember what the photograph depicted, he gave a response the interviewer found troubling. "I remember what I said I saw," the subject stated. "I have the testimony I gave. I can read my own words, but I cannot today form a clear mental image of the photograph. It's as though the memory has degraded, become less solid. I know I saw something that disturbed me profoundly. I know the details I reported were truthful at the time. But if you asked me to describe it now without reference to my written testimony, I could not." The interviewer asked if this might be simple failure of memory after 25 years. The subject disagreed. Memories fade, he said, but they fade into vagueness, into impressions. This is different. It's as though the memory is actively resisting being held. When I try to visualize what I saw, I get static, interference. And underneath the interference, I sense something trying to resolve into clarity, but unable to do so. The subject then revealed something he claimed he had told no one previously. In the years following his arrest, he had experienced recurring dreams in which he was attempting to describe the photograph to someone. In the dreams, he knew exactly what he had seen and could visualize it perfectly. But each time he tried to speak the description, his voice failed. Or the words came out wrong, or the listener disappeared before he could finish. I had those dreams for 10 years, he said. They stopped around 1900. But their emotional residue remains. I carry a permanent sense of having failed to communicate something crucial. When asked if he believed the photograph still existed, the subject paused before answering. I don't know if it matters whether it still exists physically. It exists in a way that physical destruction probably cannot erase. It's embedded itself. Not just in the people who saw it, but in the city's memory somehow. New York knows about it, even if most New Yorkers don't. The interview concluded with the archivist asking if the subject had any final thoughts he wished to share. His response was recorded verbatim. Someone created that photograph deliberately. They didn't stumble upon it. They made it for a specific purpose. Until we understand that purpose, we're cataloging symptoms without understanding the disease. The archivist's notes included an addendum. Subject appeared entirely rational throughout, but his description of memory degradation was echoed by another individual I interviewed informally, a former police detective who worked on the case. This suggests the phenomenon may be consistent across multiple witnesses. If so, it raises questions about reliability of historical testimony in this matter. No further interviews were conducted. The archival project was discontinued in 1916 due to war-related budget constraints. The transcripts were filed and forgotten. The municipal building was demolished in 1951 as part of a civic modernization program. The demolition was routine, a controlled procedure carried out over 6 weeks by a professional demolition firm. The building came down in sections, debris cleared systematically, materials salvaged or disposed of according to standard protocols. But the demolition crew reported 3 incidents that supervisors deemed noteworthy enough to document in their final report. The first incident occurred during basement clearance. Crew members reported finding a door that did not appear on demolition blueprints, a heavy door, locked, set into a reinforced concrete frame in what should have been a solid wall. The foreman confirmed the door's existence, but stated it could not be opened. The lock mechanism was seized, and the door was eventually removed by cutting through the entire frame with industrial equipment. Behind the door was a space approximately 8 by 10 feet, empty except for dust. But crew members who entered reported experiencing immediate disorientation, a sensation of the room being simultaneously larger and smaller than its measured dimensions. 2 workers refused to re-enter after initial inspection. The space was photographed for documentation, then demolished along with the surrounding structure. When the photographs were developed, they showed only darkness. The camera flash, visible in other basement documentation photos, failed to illuminate the room despite identical equipment and settings being used. The second incident involved discovery of materials during debris processing. A storage box was found in rubble from the basement level, intact despite surrounding destruction. The box was labeled Evidence 1890 and contained papers that appeared to be case files and documentation. The box was opened on-site for contents verification before being transferred to city archives. Crew members present reported that when the box was opened, several papers appeared to be blank, no writing visible despite obvious signs of having been handled and filed. But under certain lighting angles, text would briefly become visible before fading again. The phenomenon was observed by 4 separate individuals before the box was closed and sent to archives. Archives staff later confirmed receiving the box, but noted that upon their inspection, all papers appeared normally printed with no visibility issues. The discrepancy was attributed to lighting conditions at the demolition site. The third incident occurred on the final day of demolition, June 12, 1951. As the last section of building was brought down, several crew members reported seeing, for a period of approximately 30 seconds, a room that should not have been visible. They described it as a fully intact interior space, exposed by the collapse, containing furniture and appearing untouched by demolition. The foreman's report noted, "Room was visible for brief period before final collapse obscured it. Could not determine actual location within building structure. No crew members entered. Visual confirmation only. Room disappeared when debris settled." Subsequent examination of the demolition site found no intact spaces matching the crew's description. The entire building had been reduced to rubble as expected. The foreman concluded the sighting was likely an optical illusion caused by dust, shadow, and partial wall sections, creating the appearance of an intact room. But the crew members who saw it maintained their account. One stated, "I've worked 20 years in demolition. I know the difference between debris and an intact room. That was a room. It was there. And then it wasn't." No photographs were taken during the sighting. The demolition was completed without further incident. The site was cleared and prepared for new construction. But in the crew's final report, filed June 15, 1951, an unsigned note appears in the margin. "Should probably mention that 4 separate guys asked me if we need to report seeing the photograph room. Don't know what that means. Told them nothing to report. Hope that was right." The photograph officially ceased to exist in 1953 when the storage warehouse burned. No copies survived in any government archive, evidence room, or official repository. The case files were preserved in the New York Municipal Archives, but the image itself, in whatever form it had existed, however many copies had proliferated, was gone. Yet evidence of its existence persisted in ways records could not account for. In 1967, during renovation of a building on Chambers Street, contractors discovered a wall cavity containing 17 letters. All were dated 1890 to 1891. All described the photograph in detail. None were addressed or sent. The building had no connection to any individual involved in the case. The letters were read once by city archivists, logged and filed. When researchers requested access to them in 1981, the archivists could not locate them. The catalog entry existed. The acquisition record confirmed their arrival in 1967. But the letters themselves were missing. They remain missing today. In 1972, a graduate student researching the history of photography law contacted the district attorney's office requesting case files related to the 1890 emergency statute. She received the files, 3 boxes of materials, and spent 2 months conducting analysis. Her dissertation included a chapter on the case. But the chapter concluded with a statement her advisor found academically inappropriate. After examining all testimonies and documents, she could not determine with certainty whether the photograph had depicted anything at all, or whether it had been a collective psychological event mistaken for physical evidence. The dissertation was accepted, but the chapter was later removed from the published version at the graduate student's request. She declined to explain why, stating only that she had developed concerns about the validity of her conclusions. In 1984, a journalist researching historical mysteries contacted 12 descendants of individuals arrested or involved in the 1890 case. 9 agreed to interviews. None had been told the specific details of their ancestors' involvement. Most knew only that there had been legal trouble in the 1890s. But 7 of the 9 reported that their ancestors had, late in life, mentioned a photograph that should not have existed. The descriptions passed down through families were fragmentary and inconsistent, but all shared one element. The photograph had changed something in those who saw it. The journalist's article was published in a regional history magazine in 1985. It generated modest interest but no new information. The article concluded, whether the photograph was real or symbolic, evidence or myth, it occupied a space in the city's hidden history that facts alone cannot explain. The case files remain accessible in the municipal archives. Researchers visit them occasionally. Most are investigating unrelated topics and encounter the photograph case tangentially. Some request fuller access and spend hours reading testimonies, depositions, reports. A small number become deeply interested and return multiple times. And a smaller number still, 3 documented over the past 40 years, have reported experiencing dreams after their research. Dreams of a room they cannot quite visualize, containing something they cannot quite identify, perpetually existing in a state of almost but not quite being seen. These reports are not part of the official archive. They exist in informal communications, in letters to other researchers, in conversation. They are the echo of an echo, the memory of something that may never have possessed true physical form. But the dreams are consistent. The room is always narrow. The light is always wrong. And somewhere within it, barely visible, someone is waiting to be found. The photograph that was illegal to possess in 1890 no longer exists. Perhaps it never did. Perhaps it existed in too many ways to count. Perhaps it exists still, in forms that evidence logs and storage rooms cannot contain. What remains is simpler and more troubling. The certainty, held by everyone who encountered it, that they had seen something that should not have been possible to photograph. And the question that documents cannot answer: whether the photograph captured a moment in time, or whether it captured something that exists outside of time, using 1890 merely as the point where it pressed against the surface of the world and left an impression. The case file ends with no conclusion. The evidence room is empty, the building is gone, but the room in the photograph, whichever room it was, wherever it existed, has never been confirmed destroyed. It has only been confirmed unseen.